So we're starting with the eye, and we're looking here at an extreme close-up of a head model where we can see an anterior view of the left eye. Sorry, keep bumping that. What we can see is obviously we've got medial on this side and lateral on this side. So on the superolateral aspect here, so on the lateral side on the top, we've got a lacrimal gland. Now the larger eye model that we have doesn't have a lacrimal gland on it, so it's worth looking at this one to see there's a lacrimal gland there. And remember that the fluid that comes from that will get washed across the eye from lateral to medial as you blink. Now we'll just zoom out a bit, because what we're going to do next is actually look at a different model where we have a much larger eye here, and if we look at it from an anterior point of view, this time we have a right eye from an anterior view. So here we can see that the lacrimal gland that we were just looking at on the other smaller eye would be up here, so it would be on the superolateral aspect here, and then the tears will get washed across the eyeball from lateral to medial, which means they're going to wind up here, coming into here. This is the lacrimal sac, and of course that's just above. What happens below that is going to be the nasolacrimal duct. So this is the lacrimal sac on the medial aspect of the orbit there. And then of course we can see the sclera, the white of the eye. So here we've got the sclera. We can see it from the front, but naturally the sclera makes up most of the outer surface of the eye, so we can see it here posteriorly as well. And the part that's not the sclera, that's the outer aspect of the eye, is of course the cornea. We've only got half of it here, but you can see the cornea there being like a little bubble, a clear bubble hopefully on the anterior aspect of the eyeball. And then let's just have a quick look at the muscles before we start pulling things apart. So looking now at a superior point of view, we can see a superior rectus muscle here along the top, attaching into the sclera, and a lateral rectus on the lateral aspect. We can see, if we look through the orbit here, an inferior rectus down the bottom. We can just see some fibres there. Oh, and of course we can see the optic nerve running through to the back of the eyeball, which means the only rectus muscle we haven't spotted yet is going to be this one, which is the medial rectus. And to get a better view of that, we can just move the superior rectus out of the way. So there's our medial rectus. That means there's two more. So we've got a couple of obliques. So on the superior aspect, here's the superior oblique. It's a little bit medial. If we put the superior rectus back in place, you'll notice the oblique is medial to it here. And then it runs through the trochlea, which is this little sling that we've got here, and then changes angle completely. And so then again, if we move the superior rectus out of the way, here's the superior oblique attaching into the sclera. So we can see the muscle belly here, and then the tendon attaching in here to the sclera. So that's superior oblique. And then from an anterior point of view, a bit superior as well, we can see the inferior oblique here, attaching on the lateral aspect of the eyeball here. And then we can see just superior to where we saw that, we can spot the inferior rectus muscle attaching there to the sclera. So that's the 6 extrinsic muscles that we can see there. Now we can pull apart the actual eyeball itself and see some of the structures that are actually deep to the sclera. So the first one we come across is this dark pigmented structure. That's the choroid. So we're looking at the choroid here, and that's part of the vascular tunic of the eye. Now there's 3 parts to that though. So there's the choroid, and then of course the iris, which has a hole in it here, the pupil. But the other bit that we're interested in that's part of that vascular tunic is here, the red part here, which is the ciliary body. So we can see that on the inside there. So we've got choroid, iris with a pupil, and then the ciliary body making up the vascular tunic. Now that means then we're onto the inside. Before we look though at the neural tunic, what we can see here, and if I just zoom in a bit, and probably be clever if I move that out of the way, what we can see here are a couple of clear structures. So firstly, we have the lens, and you can see it's a biconvex disc, which is hopefully quite clear. So that's the lens. And then this clear structure here would be the vitreous humour. Now that's meant to indicate the fluid that's in the posterior segment. So this is indicating the posterior segment here. Okay, that's the only place you can get to see that. Now the anterior segment is made up of anterior and posterior chambers, but they're not structures that we can see on any of the models that we have. Now here we've got the posterior aspect of the eyeball, or at least the internal part here is where we're looking at the choroid here. If we turn around to look at that from an internal point of view, we can see that the inner surface of the eyeball here is the retina. So this is all retina, and the yellow disc here is of course the optic disc, and that's where the retinal vessels, but also the optic nerve, is coming through the neural tunic. So there's no photoreceptors here. That's the blind spot in terms of physiology. But in terms of anatomy, that's the optic disc. So if it's pinned here or here, that's optic disc. Now there's a little pink dot with 13 written on it there. Now that will be in the anatomical position, or in a neutral position if you're looking straight ahead. That will be lateral to the optic disc, and that's the macula lutea. Now that's the area of the retina that has the greatest concentration of photoreceptors, and that's the bit that when you're moving your eyeball around, that's the bit that you're wanting to get light to land on if you want something that you're looking at to be clear, in colour and in focus. So that's the macula lutea, that little pink dot there. So retina, macula lutea, optic disc, that's what we can see on the inside there.